The abandoned twins wailed beside their mother's rain-soaked grave, their desperate cries ignored by townsfolk who couldn't bear the burden of two motherless infants. Kiantu's weathered hands trembled as he cradled them against his chest, his Apache heart recognizing that these unwanted white children would either be his salvation or his destruction. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Cedar Creek, Arizona Territory, 1885. The rain fell in sheets, turning the freshly dug earth into mud that clung to boots and hems alike. The small gathering of townsfolk huddled beneath black umbrellas, their faces a mixture of solemn obligation and barely concealed impatience. The pine coffin had already been lowered into the ground, and Reverend Wilson's words were lost to the drumming of raindrops against taut fabric and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Sarah Miller was being laid to rest, her life cut short at 23 years by the very act of bringing new life into the world. Just 3 days prior, she had died in childbirth, her body too weak to sustain the strain of delivering twins. Her husband, Thomas, had been killed 6 months earlier when a support beam collapsed in the silver mine that had brought most of the settlers to this harsh corner of the territory. At the edge of the cemetery stood a weathered wagon, and inside it, beneath a small canvas covering, 2 newborn infants lay swaddled in rough cotton blankets. A boy and a girl, tiny and red-faced, occasionally emitting weak cries that nobody moved to answer. "Poor creatures," whispered Mabel Harrison, wife of the general store owner, to her companion. "2 mouths to feed, and not a soul to claim them." "The mission in Tucson might take them," replied Eleanor Winters, adjusting her grip on her umbrella. "Though they rarely keep siblings together, especially not boy and girl twins." The Reverend finished his hurried service, the final Amen prompting a collective sigh of relief from the assembled mourners. 2 men began shoveling mud over Sarah's coffin as the townsfolk turned away, eager to escape the downpour and return to the warmth of their homes. No one approached the wagon. From the edge of the cemetery, partially concealed by the twisted trunk of an ancient juniper, a tall figure watched in silence. Kiantu had not intended to witness the burial. He had come to trade herbs and small crafts in Cedar Creek as he did every month, only to find the town nearly deserted due to the funeral. His dark eyes, deep set in a face weathered by 45 years of sun and hardship, observed the retreating crowd with quiet judgment. Unlike the townspeople, Kiantu did not hurry away from the rain. Water was life in the desert, a blessing rather than an inconvenience. He stood motionless, raindrops streaming down his copper skin, soaking his long black hair, now threaded with silver. His buckskin shirt clung to his lean frame, but he paid no mind to his discomfort. His attention was fixed on the wagon and its abandoned cargo. As the last of the mourners disappeared from view, Kiantu stepped forward. His moccasins made no sound on the muddy ground as he approached. With careful movements, he peeled back the canvas covering to reveal the twins. They had fallen silent, as if resigned to their fate, their tiny chests rising and falling with shallow breaths. Kiantu had lost his wife Nijoni and their 3 children to smallpox 8 winters ago. The disease had swept through their camp with merciless speed, taking nearly half their band before it was done. He had survived only because he had been away gathering healing plants in the high country. When he returned, he found only ashes and graves. Since that day, he had lived alone, serving as a healer to his people, but keeping his heart closed against further loss. He had accepted solitude as his path, a shadow moving between 2 worlds, never fully belonging to either. Yet, as he gazed down at the abandoned infants, something long dormant stirred within him. These small, helpless beings had no one, just as he had no one. 2 souls at the beginning of life, and one nearing its lonely middle, all equally unwanted by the world around them. Without conscious thought, his hands reached into the wagon. With the gentle skill that had once cradled his own children, he lifted both babies, tucking them against his chest. Their warmth penetrated the wet fabric of his shirt, reaching through to his skin. One of them, the boy, opened eyes the color of a summer sky and regarded him without fear. Kiantu knelt slowly beside the fresh grave of Sarah Miller. The rain continued to fall, washing away his tracks almost as soon as they were made. In his native tongue, he spoke to the mother he had never met. "I will protect them with my life. They will know the ways of their people and mine. They will never be alone as long as I draw breath." The twins shifted against him, perhaps sensing the solemn promise in his deep voice. He adjusted his hold, drawing them closer to his body heat. Then he rose, turning away from the grave and the town beyond it. By the time Reverend Wilson returned with the sheriff to discuss the fate of the orphaned infants, the wagon held nothing but empty blankets and rainwater. The twins of Cedar Creek had vanished, leaving not a single trace behind. The rain had not relented by nightfall. Kiantu moved swiftly through the darkening landscape, his keen eyes finding paths invisible to those unfamiliar with the terrain. The twins slept against his chest, secured by a makeshift sling fashioned from his trading blanket. Their small bodies radiated heat like tiny suns, a warmth he had not felt since he last held his own children. 5 miles from Cedar Creek, Kiantu had left his horse tethered in a small grove of cottonwoods near a stream. The animal nickered softly as he approached, ears twitching forward in recognition. With careful movements, he adjusted the twins in the sling, ensuring they were secure before mounting. "We have a long journey, my friends," he murmured to the infants, his voice low and steady, "and much to prepare before we reach home." Home was a small cabin, nestled in a hidden valley at the foot of the Dragoon Mountains, where the territories of the Apache and the white settlers overlapped but rarely intersected. It was a place of his own making, built with his hands after he could no longer bear living among the memories in his tribe's camp. Not quite Apache, not white, a borderland dwelling for a man who existed between worlds. The girl began to whimper, her small face contorting with hunger. Her brother soon joined her, their cries weak but insistent. Kiantu's heart tightened in his chest. In his haste to remove them from danger, he had not considered their immediate needs. "Patience, little ones," he whispered, though he knew they could not understand. "There is a place ahead where we can find what you need." An hour later, Kiantu approached a small homestead where a lantern still burned in the window despite the late hour. He had traded with the woman who lived here, a widow named Hannah Ward, who kept goats and was known to be kind, if somewhat reclusive. More importantly, she had recently given birth to a child of her own. Hannah opened the door at his knock, a rifle held ready in her hands. Her eyes widened at the sight of the tall Apache standing on her porch, soaking wet and cradling 2 crying infants. "Mr. Kiantu?" she said, lowering her weapon slightly. "What in heaven's name?" "They need milk," he said simply. "Their mother died. No one would take them." Hannah's gaze softened as understanding dawned. Without another word, she stepped back, opening the door wider to admit him into the warmth of her home. Inside, a baby no more than 3 months old slept in a wooden cradle near the fire. "Sarah Miller's twins," she said, not a question but a recognition. "I heard about her passing, didn't know what became of her little ones." She set the rifle against the wall and reached for the infants. "Let me see them." Kiantu hesitated only a moment before allowing Hannah to take the babies. His arms felt strangely empty without their weight. "They're half-starved, poor things," she murmured, examining them with practiced eyes. "But strong enough, I think. I have milk to spare, and goat's milk besides. We can feed them." "We?" Kiantu asked, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. Hannah looked up at him, her face solemn in the firelight. "You took them when no one else would. I won't turn them away from my door." But I'm guessing you didn't come here looking for someone to take them off your hands. Kiantu shook his head slowly. No, I will care for them. A hint of a smile touched Hannah's lips. A single man raising twins? That's no small undertaking. She moved to a rocking chair and settled in, opening her blouse to offer her breast to the first twin. I can help you get started, show you how to feed them what they need, but I can't leave my own child to follow you into the mountains. I would not ask it, Kiantu replied, watching as the infant girl latched eagerly, her tiny hands flexing against Hannah's skin. I need only knowledge and supplies. I can pay. Hannah waved away his offer with her free hand. Keep your trade goods. Consider this a debt I owe to their mother's memory. I met Sarah once or twice in town, seemed a gentle soul. For 3 days, Kiantu remained at Hannah's homestead, learning the fundamentals of infant care. She taught him how to prepare goat's milk diluted with water and sweetened with a touch of honey, how to fashion cloth into diapers, how to hold the babies while feeding them from a makeshift bottle crafted from a soft leather pouch. On the morning of the 4th day, Kiantu prepared to leave with the twins. Hannah had given him a small cart to attach to his horse, lined with soft blankets and protected from the elements by a canvas covering. Inside, she had packed supplies, clean cloths, extra blankets, dried herbs for colic, and several containers of goat's milk. As he secured the twins in their new conveyance, Hannah approached with 2 small bundles wrapped in white cotton. These were meant for my Thomas and Mary, she said quietly. Before I lost them to fever last winter, only my little Samuel survived. She placed the bundles in the cart, clothes that will fit as they grow. And this, she pressed a small wooden rattle into Kiantu's hand. Every child needs something of their own to hold. Kiantu closed his fingers around the simple toy, feeling the smoothness of wood polished by loving hands. You have done too much. Hannah shook her head. We do what we must for the children, all of them. She met his eyes steadily. They will need names. Kiantu looked down at the sleeping twins, their faces peaceful for the first time since he had found them. They have names, he said. They are Ahiga and Ama, strength and water, for they will need both to survive. The journey to Kiantu's hidden valley took 2 days longer than it would have if he had been traveling alone. He stopped frequently to tend to the twins, his movements becoming more confident with each passing hour. By the time the familiar silhouette of the Dragoon Mountains appeared on the horizon, he could distinguish between Ahiga's hungry cry and Ama's demand for comfort, could change their cloths with minimal fuss, could rock them both to sleep with a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to emerge from some forgotten corner of his heart. The twins were changing too. Their faces had lost the pinched, desperate look of abandonment. Their eyes, both pairs the startling blue of their mother, followed his movements with increasing alertness. When he spoke to them, they seemed to listen, their tiny bodies stilling as if absorbing the cadence of his voice. There, Kiantu said on the evening of the 6th day, pointing toward a narrow gap between 2 rocky outcroppings. Beyond lies our home. You will grow strong there, safe from those who would separate you. The cabin came into view as they cleared the pass, a solid structure of logs and stone with a small corral attached to one side. Nearby, a clear spring bubbled up from between rocks, forming a shallow pool before continuing down the slope as a narrow stream. Pinon and juniper trees provided shade and shelter from the wind, while small patches of cleared ground hosted carefully tended plants, some for food, others for medicine. Kiantu helped his horse pull the cart to the cabin's entrance before lifting the twins and carrying them inside. The single room was neat but sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a cooking hearth, and shelves lining one wall. Various herbs hung drying from the rafters, filling the air with a complex, earthy fragrance. It is not much, he told the twins as he placed them on his bed, surrounding them with blankets to prevent them from rolling. but we will make it enough. That night, as he lay beside the sleeping infants, listening to their soft breathing, Kiantu allowed himself to fully consider the path he had chosen. He had acted on instinct at the cemetery, driven by a compassion he thought had died with his family. Now, practicality asserted itself. How would he, a solitary Apache man, raise two white children in a territory where such an arrangement would be viewed with suspicion at best, hostility at worst? His people would not reject the twins. Apache custom held that children belonged to whoever raised them, regardless of blood. But some would question his judgment. The US government's Indian agents would certainly intervene if they discovered the children. And if the people of Cedar Creek realized who had taken the Miller twins, they might come with guns and accusations of kidnapping. Ahiga stirred beside him, small fists waving in the darkness. Kiantu placed a gentle hand on the boy's chest, feeling the strong, rapid heartbeat beneath his palm. "We will find a way," he promised. The first weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion and discovery. Kiantu slept only in brief intervals, always alert to the twins' needs. He fashioned a cradle board for each infant, decorating them with protective symbols and attaching the wooden rattle Hannah had given him so they could reach it with their exploring hands. When he needed to work outside, he secured the cradle boards to his back or placed them nearby in the shade, constantly checking to ensure the twins were comfortable. One morning, as he was grinding corn for breakfast, a shadow fell across the doorway. Kiantu turned, instantly alert, to find Nashota standing there. The old medicine woman from his former band often visited to exchange knowledge and herbs, but he had not expected her today. Her eyes moved from Kiantu to the twins, who lay on a blanket on the floor, batting at pieces of colorful cloth he had hung from a bent branch above them. "So it is true," she said in Apache. "The spirits told me you had found new purpose, but I did not understand until now." Kiantu waited, uncertain of her reaction. Nashota was respected for her wisdom, and her opinion carried weight among their people. She crossed the room slowly, her lined face revealing nothing as she knelt beside the twins. They looked up at her with curious eyes, unafraid of this new presence. Nashota extended a gnarled finger, which Amma promptly grabbed with surprising strength. A smile broke across the old woman's face. This one has fire in her spirit. She looked up at Kiantu. "You have taken a difficult path, my friend." "The only path I could walk with honor," he replied. Nashota nodded, releasing her finger from Amma's grip. "The whispers have already reached our camp. Some say you have forgotten your own blood, that your grief has turned your mind." "And what do you say, Mother of Wisdom?" The medicine woman's eyes held his for a long moment. "I say that love is never a wrong path, though it may be the hardest one. Seasons changed, painting the valley in shifting colors as the twins grew from helpless infants to curious toddlers. Their first year passed in a succession of small miracles that Kiantu recorded in his memory like precious carvings. Ahiga's first smile at 3 months, Amma's determined army crawl across the cabin floor at 7 months, their first shared laugh when a butterfly landed on their cradle board. By their first birthday, which Kiantu marked with a small cake of cornmeal sweetened with wild honey, both could pull themselves upright and stand with support, their blue eyes bright with intelligence and mischief. The cabin transformed with them. What had once been a solitary man's sparse dwelling now overflowed with evidence of the children. Kiantu crafted small toys from wood and leather, built low beds as they outgrew their cradle boards, and erected a fence around the spring pool to prevent accidents. The walls, once bare, now displayed colorful weavings that Nashota and other women from his band had brought as gifts once they understood his commitment to the twins. "Ba-ba-ba!" Amma babbled one morning, reaching for Kiantu as he prepared breakfast. Her hair had grown into soft golden curls that framed her face like a halo. "Good morning, little one," he replied, lifting her easily. "Are you hungry?" Ahiga, not to be left out, pulled himself up using the edge of his bed, and tottered a few unsteady steps before plopping down on his bottom with a look of surprise that made Kiantu laugh. The boy's hair was darker than his sister's, a warm honey brown that reminded Kiantu of autumn grasses. "Soon you will both run faster than your old father can follow," he said, using the word father in Apache. He had begun speaking to them in both English and his native tongue, believing they should know both worlds that had created them. Nashota visited regularly, bringing not only herbs and supplies, but also stories and songs from their people. Other Apache women sometimes accompanied her, initially out of curiosity, but later out of genuine affection for the blue-eyed children who showed no fear of their copper-skinned visitors. The twins became favorites in the band, with warriors occasionally stopping by to leave small gifts: a beautifully tanned rabbit skin, a toy bow for Ahiga, a tiny basket for Amma. Yet Kiantu knew they could not remain isolated forever. The children needed to understand the white world too, if they were to navigate their future safely. When the twins were 18 months old, he began making monthly trips to a trading post 30 miles from Cedar Creek, where they were less likely to be recognized as the missing Miller twins. These excursions were exercises in vigilance. Kiantu would dress the children in simple clothes that wouldn't draw attention, and he would wear the attire of a civilized Indian: cotton shirt, denim pants, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his features. He taught the twins to stay close, to speak only Apache when others were near, to answer to the names John and Mary if any white person addressed them. "Why we hide, Father?" Ahiga asked during one such trip, his English improving but still halting. The boy had been watching a group of white children playing near the trading post, his expression wistful. Kiantu knelt beside his son, choosing his words carefully. "Some people would not understand our family. They might try to separate us." Amma, who had been examining a bolt of bright calico fabric inside the trading post, turned at this and hurried to Kiantu's side. "No separate," she declared fiercely, her small hands clutching at his shirt. "We stay together." The shopkeeper's wife, a plump woman named Mrs. Jenkins, observed this exchange with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Your children?" she asked Kiantu when he approached the counter with his purchases. "Yes," he answered simply. "They favor their mother, I'd say," she remarked, her eyes lingering on the twins' blue eyes and fair skin. "They favor the sky and the sun," Kiantu replied, his tone closing the subject. As they rode home that day, Ahiga unusually quiet in front of him on the horse, Kiantu sensed that questions were forming in the boy's active mind. At 3 years old, the twins were beginning to notice the differences between themselves and their father, between their hidden life in the valley and the wider world they glimpsed during their trips to the trading post. That night, after placing the sleeping Amma in her bed, Kiantu found Ahiga sitting by the hearth, staring into the flames with an intensity that seemed beyond his years. "Why is our skin not like yours?" the boy asked without preamble. Kiantu sat beside his son, feeling the weight of the moment. He had always known this conversation would come, though perhaps not so soon. "You were born from another mother and father," he said gently. "Your mother's name was Sarah. She had hair like golden wheat and eyes like yours, blue as the summer sky. Where is she?" Ahiga's voice was small. "She walks with the ancestors now. She died when you and Amma were born." Kiantu paused, then added, "She loved you very much. With her last breath, she gave you life. And our father, our first father? He was called Thomas. He died before you were born, while working in a mine." Ahiga absorbed this information in silence, his young face solemn. Finally, he asked the question Kiantu had been dreading. "Why did you take us?" Kiantu reached out, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I did not take you, Ahiga. I chose you. As you chose me. He drew the child into his lap, something he did less often now that the twins were growing so quickly. No one wanted two babies with no parents. They would have sent you away, separated you from Amma. When I saw you, I remembered my own children who had gone to the spirit world. My heart, which had been closed like a fist, opened again. Your children. Ahiga looked up, surprised. Yes, long ago. Their names were Daxi, Istas, and little Kai. They would have loved you both. Ahiga leaned against Kiantu's chest, his small body relaxing. I'm glad you chose us, Father. As am I, my son. As am I. But later, as Kiantu gazed at the sleeping twins, a shadow of worry crossed his face. The questions would only grow more complex as the children did, and the world beyond their valley would not always accept their unusual family with understanding or kindness. By the time Ahiga and Amma reached their 5th year, they moved through their days with the easy confidence of children who know they are loved. They spoke both Apache and English with fluency, switching between languages as naturally as they alternated between play and rest. Their minds absorbed everything Kiantu taught them: how to identify edible plants, how to move quietly through the forest, how to read the weather in the shape of clouds and the behavior of animals. Kiantu had begun teaching them to read English as well, using books traded for at the post, simple primers and illustrated Bible stories that Mrs. Jenkins set aside for the Indians' unusual children, as she called them. Though Kiantu's own reading was rudimentary, he worked alongside the twins, their shared learning creating a new bond between them. Look, Father, Amma exclaimed one spring afternoon, pointing to a word in her book. This says heaven, like where our first mother is. Kiantu nodded, watching as she traced the letters with her small finger. Amma had a quickness of mind that sometimes startled him, grasping concepts almost before he could explain them. Ahiga was more deliberate, but equally determined, refusing to abandon any task until he had mastered it. And this, Ahiga said, indicating another page, says family. He looked up, his blue eyes serious. Mrs. Jenkins told me family means people who look the same and live together, but we don't look like you. These moments came more frequently now, innocent observations that revealed the growing awareness of their difference. Kiantu had learned to address them directly, believing that truth, carefully presented, was kinder than comforting lies. Mrs. Jenkins sees only with her eyes, not with her heart, he replied. Family is those who protect each other, who belong together in spirit. The eagle does not reject its young if their feathers are a different shade. Usually, such explanations satisfied the twins, but as they encountered more people during their trading post visits, as they observed other families and heard casual comments, their questions became more pointed. Why do some people look at us strangely when we are together? Amma asked once, after a trader had stared openly at their small group. Why did that man call you Injun? Ahiga wanted to know, having overheard a dismissive remark not meant for children's ears. Kiantu answered as honestly as he could, explaining the long history of mistrust between their peoples, the wars and broken promises, the fear and ignorance that fueled prejudice. He taught them to hold their heads high, but also to be cautious, to recognize when danger might be approaching. The world beyond our valley is not always kind, he told them, but there is good in it too, if you know how to find it. The twins were 6 when that lesson was tested. They had traveled to a new trading post, farther from their home, but offering goods they couldn't find elsewhere. Kiantu had just finished exchanging a bundle of carefully tanned deerskins for coffee, sugar, and fabric, when a loud voice cut through the quiet murmur of commerce. Well, look what we have here, if it ain't an Injun playing daddy to white kids. Kiantu turned slowly to face a tall man with a face reddened by sun and whiskey. Behind him stood two companions, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and malice. "We're just passing through," Kiantu said evenly, placing his body between the men and the twins, who had drawn close to his legs at the first sound of the hostile voice. The man spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the wooden floor. "Them's white children. Where'd you get 'em, Redskin? Steal 'em from some homestead?" A small crowd had begun to gather, attracted by the confrontation. Kiantu felt Ama's fingers digging into his leg, heard Ahiga's breathing quicken with fear. "They are my children," Kiantu said, his voice calm but firm. "We will leave now." He began guiding the twins toward the door, one hand on each child's shoulder, but the man stepped into their path, blocking the exit. "I don't think so. Sheriff might have some questions about this arrangement." The man reached out as if to grab Ahiga's arm. Before his hand could make contact, a new voice joined the confrontation. "That's quite enough, Mr. Harker." The crowd parted to admit a woman in her 50s, dressed in a severe black dress with a white collar. Her grey-streaked hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of a school teacher or church elder. "Miss Abernathy," the man, Harker, acknowledged, his tone losing some of its belligerence. "These children and their father have been trading at Wilcox Station for years," Miss Abernathy continued, coming to stand beside Kiantu. "Their situation is unusual, certainly, but not unknown to those of us who have lived in these parts long enough to remember the circumstances." Kiantu had never seen this woman before and knew she was creating a fiction to diffuse the situation. He remained silent, grateful for the unexpected ally. "What circumstances would those be?" one of Harker's companions asked, sounding genuinely curious rather than threatening. Miss Abernathy fixed him with a stern look. "Those that are none of your business, young man. Now, I believe this family was just leaving." She turned to Kiantu. "I'll walk you to your wagon." Outside, away from the tense atmosphere of the trading post, Kiantu finally spoke. "Thank you. You took a risk for strangers." The woman's stern expression softened as she looked down at the twins, who were still pressed close to Kiantu's sides. "I'm Elizabeth Abernathy. I run a small school about 5 miles west of here." She paused. "Those men were looking for trouble, not justice. I couldn't stand by and watch. I am Kiantu. These are my children, Ahiga and Ama." Miss Abernathy nodded, studying the twins with intelligent eyes. "They're of school age, I'd say. Are they receiving an education?" "I teach them what I can," Kiantu replied cautiously, "and I'm sure you do admirably." Her tone was free from condescension. "But children benefit from learning alongside others their age. My school accepts all children, regardless of background. Should you ever be interested, you would be welcome." Before Kiantu could respond, she reached into her pocket and withdrew a small book. "For your library," she said, offering it to Ama, who accepted it with wide eyes. "It's poems and stories. Some are quite beautiful." With a brief nod to Kiantu, Miss Abernathy turned and walked back toward the trading post, her straight back and measured stride suggesting a woman accustomed to charting her own course, regardless of convention. As they drove away in their wagon, Ahiga broke the silence that had fallen over them since the confrontation. "Are there other children like us, Father, who belong to two worlds?" Kiantu considered the question carefully. "There are children born of both worlds, with one parent from each. And there are those taken as captives who become part of new families. But few choose, as we have chosen, to make a family across the divide." "Is that why some people are angry?" Ama asked, the new book clutched tightly to her chest. "Some people fear what they do not understand," Kiantu replied. "And some have lost so much to the conflict between our peoples that their hearts have hardened against any peace between us. The twins fell silent again, absorbing this. Finally, Amma spoke, her voice small but determined. "I don't want to go to that school. I want to stay with you." "And so you shall," Kiantu assured her, "for as long as you wish it." But that night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Kiantu sat outside the cabin, gazing at the star-filled sky. The encounter at the trading post had shaken him more than he had let the children see. It was a reminder that their peaceful existence hung by a thread, vulnerable to the prejudices and suspicions of the world beyond their valley. More troubling still was the realization that as the twins grew, they would need more than he alone could provide. They would need friends their own age, education beyond what he could teach, and eventually a place in the wider world that had already begun to question their very right to be a family. The twins' seventh winter brought heavy snow to the valley, confining them to the cabin for days at a time. Kiantu used these quiet hours to advance their education, teaching them more complex reading from the growing collection of books they had acquired, showing them how to calculate numbers using trading post receipts, and deepening their knowledge of Apache history and customs. But he could see that something had changed since the confrontation at the trading post. A thoughtfulness had entered their expressions, a new awareness of the complicated world beyond their protected valley. They asked more questions about their birth parents, about why some white people feared or hated Apaches, about what would happen when they grew older. "Will we always live here with you?" Ahiga asked one evening as they sat by the fire, snow whispering against the cabin walls. Kiantu looked up from the bow he was repairing. "That will be for you to decide when you are grown. Every person must find their own path." "But we'll always be family," Amma insisted, looking up from the small weaving Nashota had been teaching her to create. "No matter where we go." "Always," Kiantu agreed, but something in his chest tightened at the thought of them leaving, of them stepping into a world that might not accept them as his had. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and bringing new life to the valley, Kiantu made a decision that had been forming in his mind throughout the winter. He called the twins to sit with him beneath the old juniper tree that stood near their cabin. "I have been thinking about Miss Abernathy's school," he began. The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication that had grown stronger between them over the years. "You said we didn't have to go," Amma reminded him, a hint of worry in her voice. "And you do not," Kiantu assured her. "But I believe it would be good for you to learn among other children, to know more of that part of your heritage." Ahiga's brow furrowed. "Are you sending us away?" "No, my son, never." Kiantu reached out to place a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I would take you to the school 2 days each week. The rest of the time you would remain here, learning our ways as before." "Why now?" Amma asked, always quick to probe for deeper understanding. Kiantu considered his answer carefully. "Because you are growing, and your world must grow with you. Because knowledge is like a weapon. It can protect you when I cannot be beside you." The twins were silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. Finally, Ahiga spoke. "Will the other children be like those men at the trading post? Will they hate us because we're different?" "Some might not understand at first," Kiantu acknowledged, "but Miss Abernathy seems to be a woman of strong heart, and you have strong hearts too. You will face this challenge as you have faced others, together and with courage." 2 weeks later, Kiantu rode with the twins to Miss Abernathy's school, a modest wooden building with a bell tower and a small yard where about 20 children of various ages played before classes began. Conversation stopped as they approached, curious eyes turning to examine the newcomers. Miss Abernathy emerged from the schoolhouse, her face breaking into a smile of recognition. "Mr. Kiantu, I'm pleased you've decided to visit us." "We have come to accept your invitation," Kiantu replied, helping the twins down from the horse. "If it still stands." "Of course." She turned her attention to Ahiga and Amma. "Welcome to our school. We're very glad to have you join us." The twins stayed close to Kiantu, their eyes wary as they observed the other children, who had gathered into a loose semicircle at a cautious distance. "Children," Miss Abernathy addressed her pupils, "these are our new students, Ahiga and Amma. They will be joining us on Tuesdays and Thursdays." A boy about 9 years old stepped forward. "Are they Indians? They don't look like Indians." Before Miss Abernathy could respond, Amma answered, her voice clear and steady. "Our father is Apache. We are his children." A murmur ran through the gathered students. A girl with braided red hair frowned. "But you're white." "We are both," Ahiga said, standing straighter. "Like the sky can be both blue and clouded." Miss Abernathy's eyes sparkled with approval at his response. "Indeed, and in this classroom we learn from all perspectives." She turned to Kiantu. "They will be well cared for, Mr. Kiantu. I promise you that." Kiantu nodded, then knelt to speak to the twins. "I will return when the sun touches the top of that hill," he said, pointing westward. "Remember who you are and what I have taught you." "We will, Father," they responded in unison. As he rode away, Kiantu felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. He had chosen this path believing it best for the twins, but watching them stand alone at the edge of that dusty schoolyard, two small figures bridging a vast divide, he wondered if he had asked too much of their young hearts. The twins' first months at Miss Abernathy's school unfolded in a series of challenges and small triumphs. Those initial days had been difficult. Wary glances from classmates, whispered comments when they thought the twins couldn't hear, questions that probed at the edges of their unusual family. But Ahiga and Amma faced these trials with the quiet resilience Kiantu had cultivated in them, neither retreating nor lashing out. Miss Abernathy proved to be a steadfast ally. She integrated Apache words and stories into her lessons, invited Kiantu to speak to the class about medicinal plants, and firmly corrected any student who showed disrespect. Gradually, curiosity replaced suspicion. The twins' advanced reading abilities and Amma's quick mathematical mind earned grudging respect, while Ahiga's natural athletic prowess during schoolyard games won admiration from even the most skeptical boys. By their 8th birthday, they had formed tentative friendships. Sarah Jenkins, the shy daughter of the Trading Post proprietors, often saved seats for them during lunch. William Taylor, a rancher's son with a passion for drawing, traded sketches with Amma, who had developed a talent for capturing animals in flowing lines. Even Jesse Cooper, who had initially been their most vocal critic, eventually sought out Ahiga to practice knife-throwing techniques the boy had learned from his father. "The other children are different now," Amma observed one evening, as Kiantu braided her hair, which had grown long and thick, the color of summer wheat. "They don't look at us like we're strange anymore. The people fear what they do not understand," Kiantu replied, his fingers moving with practiced ease. "When they come to know you, the fear dissolves like morning mist." Yet, not all barriers fell so easily. As the twins grew and their world expanded, Kiantu began to notice subtle changes in their behavior. They sometimes spoke English to each other when alone, adopting expressions and mannerisms from their schoolmates. They asked for clothes similar to what the other children wore. Occasionally, they seemed embarrassed by Apache customs that had once been simply part of their life. These shifts were small but significant, like the first pebbles that precede a landslide. Kiantu observed them with a mixture of understanding and quiet heartache. He had always known this day would come, when the twins would begin to question where they truly belonged. The first serious test of their fragile balance came when Ahiga turned 10. A schoolmate's birthday celebration led to an invitation for both twins to attend a larger gathering in town. a harvest festival where families from surrounding homesteads would congregate for food, music, and community bonding. "Can we go, Father?" Ahiga asked, his eyes alight with excitement. "William says there will be horse races and a shooting contest." "And music and dancing," Amma added eagerly. "Sarah's mother is making special dresses for all the girls." Kiantu hesitated. They had carefully avoided Cedar Creek since that rainy day 7 years earlier when he had taken the abandoned infants. The neighboring town hosting the festival was larger, less likely to remember the Miller twins, but still, such a public gathering carried risks. "It would mean being among many strangers," he said carefully. "Some may not be kind about our family." "We know that," Ahiga responded with the straightforward practicality that increasingly characterized him. "But we can't hide forever. You taught us that a warrior faces challenges directly." Amma nodded in agreement, though something flickered across her expressive face, a shadow of uncertainty perhaps, or a deeper understanding of what her brother's words truly meant. Kiantu studied them both, these children who were no longer children in the simplest sense. Their faces had begun to lose the roundness of early childhood, revealing the stronger lines of approaching adolescence. Ahiga stood nearly to Kiantu's shoulder now, his frame promising the height and strength of the man he would become. Amma remained more delicate in build, but her presence had a quiet intensity that drew attention even when she was silent. They were changing, growing toward a future he had always known would come, but had somehow hoped to delay. "You may go," he said finally, "but I will accompany you to the edge of town, and you must promise to stay together, always." The twins exchanged one of their silent looks, a communication as natural to them as breathing. Then Ahiga nodded. "We promise, Father." That night, Nashota arrived unexpectedly, her ancient face more lined than ever, but her eyes still sharp as obsidian. She had taken to appearing when most needed, as if the winds themselves whispered to her of Kiantu's troubles. "The children wish to walk in the white world," she stated, accepting the cup of tea Kiantu offered. "For a day only," he replied, though they both knew it signified much more. Nashota sipped her tea thoughtfully. "When a young eagle first stretches its wings, it does not mean it will abandon the nest forever." She fixed Kiantu with her penetrating gaze, "But the day will come when they must choose their sky. And if they choose a sky where I cannot follow?" The question that had haunted him for years finally found voice. "Then you will watch them fly," she answered simply, "and know that your love gave them wings strong enough for the journey." The day of the harvest festival arrived with a sky so intensely blue it seemed to mock Kiantu's apprehension. He had spent the previous evening preparing the twins, reminding them of their story. They were the children of a white woman who had died, adopted by him when no one else would take them. A simple truth that omitted only the location and circumstances. Amma wore a dress that Sarah Jenkins' mother had helped make, a modest creation of blue cotton that matched her eyes, with a ribbon sash at the waist. Her hair was braided in the white style, though she had insisted on weaving in a small feather, a subtle nod to her Apache upbringing. Ahiga wore his newest clothes, sturdy pants, a clean white shirt, and boots that Kiantu had traded 3 perfect deerskins to acquire. Both looked both eager and nervous, standing straighter than usual, as if bracing themselves. "Remember," Kiantu said as they neared the town, the sounds of the festival already drifting toward them on the autumn breeze. "I will wait at Broken Oak Creek until sundown." "We'll be careful, Father," Amma promised, reaching to squeeze his hand. Ahiga nodded, his expression solemn. "We won't bring trouble." Kiantu watched them walk away, 2 golden heads moving steadily toward the gathering crowd, shoulders squared with determination. Pride swelled in his chest, momentarily overwhelming his concern. Whatever challenges awaited them, his children faced them with courage. The festival was everything the twins had imagined and more. Booths and tables lined the town square, overflowing with harvest bounty. Golden corn, plump pumpkins, apples in shining pyramids. A band played lively tunes on a wooden platform, while couples danced in a cleared space nearby. Children darted between adults, playing games of tag and showing off small prizes won in various contests. William found them first, his freckled face breaking into a wide grin. "You came. Come on, they're about to start the shooting contest for boys our age." Ahiga glanced at Amma, reluctant to leave her alone. "Go," she urged. Sarah said she'd be by the quilting display with her mother. The siblings separated for the first time that day, each drawn into different aspects of the celebration. Ahiga joined the boys' shooting contest, where his steady hands and keen eye, honed by years of Kiantu's patient instruction, earned him second place and grudging respect from the local boys. Amma found Sarah and several other girls from school, who pulled her into their circle with excited chatter about the handsome son of a cattle rancher who had smiled at one of them. Hours passed in a blur of new experiences. They tasted foods Kiantu had never prepared: fried dough sprinkled with sugar, rich chocolate cake, pickled vegetables in tangy brine. They listened to music played on instruments they had only read about in books. They observed the easy camaraderie of white families, the different ways mothers and fathers interacted with their children, the casual affection displayed between young couples. It was intoxicating and disorienting. For the first time, the twins found themselves fully immersed in the world of their birth, surrounded by people who looked like them, who shared customs and references, familiar to their blood if not their upbringing. "Your shooting was impressive," a man remarked to Ahiga as the boy collected his prize, a small pocket knife with a bone handle. "Your pa teach you?" "Yes, sir," Ahiga replied. "He's an excellent hunter." "He a rancher? Don't recall seeing you folks around here before." Ahiga hesitated, remembering Kiantu's cautious instructions. "We live a ways out, near the mountains." The man nodded, seeming to accept this vague explanation. "Well, you've got a natural talent. Might want to think about entering the county competition next spring. Good prizes to be had." Similar conversations occurred throughout the day. People were curious about the twins, these articulate, well-mannered children they hadn't seen before. Most accepted their brief answers without pressing, but each question added to a growing sense of pretense, as if they were actors in a play whose script they only partially knew. Late in the afternoon, as shadows lengthened across the town square, Amma found herself standing apart from the festivities, watching families gather for the final meal of the day. Tables groaned under the weight of shared dishes. Children called to parents, husbands and wives coordinated their efforts with the practiced ease of long partnership. "There you are," Ahiga said, appearing at her side. "I've been looking for you." Amma didn't turn, her eyes still fixed on the domestic scene before them. "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if our real parents had lived?" Ahiga was silent for a long moment. "Kiantu is our real father," he said finally, but his voice held a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "I know," Amma whispered, "but here, today, don't you feel it? Like there's another life we might have had." Before Ahiga could answer, a commotion erupted near the center of the gathering. Raised voices, angry and insistent, cut through the festival's ambient noise. The twins moved closer, drawn by curiosity and a vague sense of dread. A man was speaking loudly, his face flushed with drink and indignation. "I'm telling you, I recognize them. Those are the Miller twins, the ones that went missing from Cedar Creek 7-8 years back, right after Sarah Miller was buried." Ahiga grabbed Amma's hand, his fingers tightening around hers. The crowd's attention was turning, searching faces until eyes began to settle on them, the unfamiliar blonde children at the edge of the gathering. "Time to go," Ahiga murmured. already pulling his sister toward the road that would lead them back to where Kiantu waited. They didn't run. Running would only confirm suspicion, but walked with deliberate speed, feeling the weight of stairs on their backs, hearing the murmurs that followed them like ripples in a pond. "Ahiga," Amma whispered, fear threading through her voice. "What will happen now?" Kiantu knew something was wrong the moment he saw the twins approaching Broken Oak Creek. They weren't running, but there was urgency in their measured stride, tension visible in Ahiga's rigid shoulders and Amma's tightly clasped hands. He rose from where he had been waiting, every sense suddenly alert. "Someone recognized us," Ahiga reported without preamble when they reached him. "Said we were the Miller twins from Cedar Creek." Kiantu's heart contracted painfully, but his face remained calm. "Did they follow you?" "I don't think so," Amma replied, glancing back over her shoulder. "But they were talking about sending for the sheriff." With swift efficiency, Kiantu helped the twins onto his horse and mounted behind them. They rode in silence, taking a circuitous route home that avoided established trails, Kiantu frequently checking behind them for signs of pursuit. The festive clothes that had marked the day's special occasion now seemed like costumes from a play that had ended abruptly, the bright colors incongruous against the darkening landscape. Only when they reached the safety of their valley, the cabin a shadowy silhouette against the twilight sky, did Kiantu finally speak. "We must talk about what happened. But first, change your clothes and eat. Hard conversations are better faced with strength." The twins obeyed, moving through their familiar evening routine with subdued motions. The carefree excitement that had animated them that morning had vanished, replaced by a somber awareness that something fundamental had shifted in their world. As they ate the simple meal Kiantu prepared, the silence between them felt heavy with unasked questions. Finally, seated before the hearth where so many important conversations had taken place over the years, Kiantu addressed the fear they had all been carrying since leaving the festival. "If they believe you are the Miller children, they may come looking." "What will happen if they find us?" Amma asked, her voice small but steady. Kiantu met her gaze directly, knowing they deserved honesty. "Some might say I stole you, that I had no right to take white children. They might try to separate us." Ahiga's jaw tightened. "You saved us when no one wanted us. They can't just take us away." "The law may see it differently," Kiantu replied gently. "White law does not always recognize the bonds we know are true." "Then we'll hide," Amma declared with fierce determination. "We can go deeper into Apache territory where they won't follow." The suggestion hung in the air, a desperate solution that revealed how deeply the day's events had shaken her. Kiantu studied both children, no longer children really, but young people standing at the threshold of a more complex understanding of their world. "We could run," he acknowledged, "but that is not the way of courage, and it would not serve you well in the end. You belong to both worlds, and someday you must find your place within them." "I don't want to belong to a world that would take me from my family," Ahiga said, his voice breaking slightly on the last word. Kiantu moved to sit between the twins, placing an arm around each of their shoulders. "Listen to me, my children. When I found you beside your mother's grave, I made a promise, not just to care for you, but to help you become who you were meant to be. If that journey leads you away from me someday, I will accept it with an open heart." "We would never choose to leave you," Amma insisted, leaning into his embrace. "Perhaps not by choice," Kiantu said softly, "but the river of life carries us where it will. We must be prepared for all possibilities." That night, after the twins had finally fallen into troubled sleep, Kiantu sat alone outside the cabin, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast darkness. The peace of the valley, which had sheltered them for so many years, suddenly seemed fragile, vulnerable to the intrusion of a world that operated by different rules. He had always known this day might come. From the moment he lifted those two small abandoned lives from beside their mother's grave, he had understood the risk he was taking, not just the risk of raising children alone in a harsh land, but the deeper risk of loving those who might one day be taken from him. Dawn found him still awake, his decision made. When the twins arose, he was already preparing for their journey. "We're leaving," Ahiga asked, noticing the supplies Kiantu had laid out. "Not running away," Kiantu clarified, "but going to meet what comes rather than waiting for it to find us. It is time for truth to stand in the open." By mid-morning, they had reached Hannah Ward's homestead. The widow's hair had grayed considerably in the decades since she had helped Kiantu feed the newborn twins, but her eyes were as kind and direct as ever. She listened without interruption as Kiantu explained the situation. "I always wondered if this day would come," she said when he had finished. "Cedar Creek has a new sheriff now, Jacob Turner. He's a fair man, fought in the war, lost a leg at Gettysburg, not quick to judge from what I've seen. Would he take the children from me?" Kiantu asked plainly. Hannah's gaze moved to the twins, who stood a few paces away, pretending not to listen. "That would depend on many things. The law might not be on your side, but Turner respects more than just law. He respects truth." "Then we will offer him truth," Kiantu decided. "Will you come with us to speak of what you know?" Hannah nodded without hesitation. "I'll hitch up my wagon." As they prepared to depart for Cedar Creek, Amar approached Kiantu, her face solemn. "Father," she said quietly, "if they try to separate us, I want you to know that no matter where I am or who they say I belong to, I am your daughter. Always." Ahiga joined them, his expression equally resolute. "And I am your son, not by blood, but by choice. Every day we choose to be family, and nothing they say can change that." Kiantu felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. These young people, not yet fully grown but already showing such wisdom and courage, were the true legacy of his life. Whatever happened in Cedar Creek, whatever judgment the white world passed on their unusual family, that truth would remain. "Come," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to break through. "It is time to face this challenge as we have faced all others, together." The journey to Cedar Creek seemed both too long and too short, each mile bringing them closer to a confrontation that could change everything. As they approached the town where it had all begun a decade earlier, Kiantu found himself searching the skyline, half expecting to see the same storm clouds that had poured rain upon Sarah Miller's burial. But the sky was clear, offering neither omen nor comfort as they entered the place where two abandoned lives had first intersected with his own. The town had grown in the intervening years, boasting several new buildings and a proper main street lined with hitching posts and wooden sidewalks. People stopped to stare as the unusual procession made its way toward the sheriff's office, Hannah Ward driving her wagon, Kiantu riding beside it, and the twins following on the pony they shared for longer journeys. Word of their approach seemed to spread ahead of them, bringing curious onlookers to doorways and windows. At the sheriff's office, a tall man with a wooden leg and a weathered face watched their approach from the boardwalk. His hand rested casually on his holstered pistol, but his expression showed curiosity rather than hostility. "Sheriff Turner," Hannah called as they drew near. "These folks have come a long way to speak with you about a matter of some importance." The sheriff's gaze moved from Hannah to Kiantu, then settled on the twins with their fair hair and striking blue eyes. Something like recognition flickered across his face. "I reckon this has to do with the talk coming out of that harvest festival," he said. "Best come inside. This doesn't need an audience." "Deal." As they followed Sheriff Turner into the building that would decide their fate, Kiantu felt Ahiga and Amma move closer to him, one on either side, like wings protecting his heart. Whatever came next, these children, his children, had already given him more than he had ever dared to hope for after losing his first family. They had given him a reason to live when grief had nearly consumed him. They had taught him that love could grow in the most unlikely soil. And in this moment, facing the judgment of a world that might not understand what they had built together, they stood beside him, not as helpless dependents, but as partners in the story they had written together. Sheriff Jacob Turner's office was spare and functional, much like the man himself. He listened without interruption as Kiantu recounted the story of that rainy day 10 years earlier. The abandoned infants, the promise made at a fresh grave, the decade of love and learning that followed. Hannah added her testimony about helping with the newborns, while Ahiga and Amar sat straight-backed and solemn, their hands clasped tightly together. When the account was complete, Turner rose from behind his desk and limped to the window, gazing out at the town square where curious onlookers still lingered. "I fought alongside Indians in the war," he said finally, turning back to face them. "Shawnee scouts saved my life at Chancellorsville. Good men." He paused, his weathered face thoughtful. "But the law's not always concerned with what's good. It's concerned with what's proper." "And is it proper to separate children from the only father they've known?" Hannah challenged, her voice quiet but firm. Turner shook his head slowly. "That's not for me to decide. There's a judge comes through here every 2 months. He's due next week. This would be his jurisdiction." Ahiga stood, drawing himself up to his full height. "With respect, sir, we don't need a judge to tell us who our father is." "Maybe not, son," Turner replied, "but you might need one to tell everyone else, especially since there's already talk of a reward being offered for information about the Miller twins." "A reward?" Amma echoed, her face paling. "From whom?" "Sarah Miller's cousin from back east," Turner explained. "Arrived about a year ago, asking questions about her family's property. When he heard rumors at the festival about twins matching your description, he got mighty interested." Kiantu absorbed this new information with outward calm, though his mind raced with its implications. "We will stay for the judge," he decided. "We will speak our truth." Turner nodded. "You can use the old tailor place at the edge of town. It's been empty since the old man passed. I'll make sure you're not troubled while you wait." The week that followed was the strangest of the twins' lives. They remained in Cedar Creek, inhabiting the abandoned house with its musty rooms and faded furnishings, venturing out only when necessary. Some townsfolk kept their distance, viewing the unconventional family with suspicion. Others, remembering Sarah Miller's tragic story, showed unexpected kindness, bringing food, offering small courtesies, sharing memories of the mother the twins had never known. She had a beautiful singing voice, Mrs. Patterson told them one afternoon, her eyes misty with recollection. Used to sing in the church choir before her husband died, always had a kind word for everyone. These fragments of their birth mother, her gentle smile, her talent for embroidery, her love of wild roses, were precious gifts to the twins, filling in blank spaces in their understanding of themselves. Yet they also underscored what Kiantu had given them, not just survival, but identity, purpose, and unconditional love. When Judge William Harrington finally arrived, the courthouse was packed with spectators. The proceedings were brief but intense. Sarah's cousin, a thin man named Everett Mills, argued that the children had been unlawfully taken, that they belonged with their mother's bloodkin, that they deserved the small inheritance that awaited them. Kiantu spoke last, his words simple and direct. "I did not take what was wanted," he said. "I cherished what was abandoned. I have taught them to honor both sides of their heritage, their mother's people and mine. They are not possessions to be claimed, but young souls who can speak their own truth." And speak they did, with eloquence that silenced the courtroom. Amma described learning to read both Apache pictographs and English script at their father's side. Ahiga recounted hunting trips where Kiantu taught him not only how to track and shoot, but how to thank the animals who gave their lives to sustain them. He showed us how to live with honor, Amma concluded, her voice unwavering despite the tears that shimmered in her eyes. How to stand between two worlds and find balance. Judge Harrington, a man of considerable experience and few illusions, studied the unusual family before him. His judgment, when it came, was as unexpected as it was wise. The law does not easily encompass what has happened here, he declared. But justice must be larger than law when circumstances demand it. These children were indeed Sarah Miller's by birth, and they have rights to her legacy. But they are equally Kiantu's children by the higher claim of devoted care and love. Therefore, I rule that the Miller twins shall remain with the man they call father, with annual visits from their mother's cousin should he wish to know them. Any inheritance shall be held in trust until they reach adulthood. Years later, on a spring day much like the one when their journey began, Ahiga and Amma stood beside Kiantu at Sarah Miller's grave. They were 18 now, poised on the threshold of adulthood, their faces showing the distinct beauty that comes from growing up secure in one's identity despite external challenges. Amma placed a bouquet of wild roses on the weathered stone, while Ahiga set down a small carved figure, an eagle with outstretched wings, symbolizing freedom and protection in Apache tradition. "I think she would be pleased," Kiantu said softly, silver now dominant in his once black hair, lines of wisdom etched more deeply around his eyes. "Both with who you have become and with the bridge you have helped to build between our peoples." Amma slipped her hand into her father's. "You taught us that family isn't about blood or appearance. It's about who stays," Ahiga finished, his hand joining theirs. "Who chooses to love even when it's difficult." As they turned from the grave, walking three abreast toward the future, the late afternoon sun cast their shadows far ahead, not as separate silhouettes, but as a single, unbroken shape upon the earth, impossible to divide.